I'm here with Christine Van Gyn, and we're talking about some of the recently enacted emergency orders by the Quebec and Ontario governments. And so before the break, we were talking about reasonable grounds on whether police can stop you here. I know that you've got a follow-up question for me on this. I'll take that.
Yeah, so my understanding is, the police require these reasonable and probable grounds. They can't stop you solely because you're outside of your house. That's not enough for a suspicion.
Yep.
But I can imagine, there are going to be a lot of broken taillight stops and then follow-up questions of, hey, what are you doing outside of your house? And what happens in that situation if a person says, I'm not compelled to answer that question? Can they expect to get a ticket in that situation?
Well, I think the better question is whether they would be convicted if they do get a ticket. So the police are not able to compel anybody to be able to give them evidence, and that's a charter protection that we have. And so even if the police do stop them, and the police can ask them, but Canadians need to know that they actually have these fundamental rights. They're protected under the charter, and they actually don't have to respond to the police. Now, if they have an exemption, a legitimate exemption, I'm sure it helps the police officers be able to do their job. But on the other side, we have to understand that there could be an abuse of this, and we want to make sure that we don't have an abuse of power. And the law actually allows for that, so there's definitely challenges there.
It certainly seems like all of these orders, both in Quebec and in Ontario, leaves a lot of discretion in the hands of police. And looking at some of the reports of how the curfew's been enforced in Quebec raised some concerns. I mean, I know that there have been tickets issued to people in Quebec who are homeless, and essentially a curfew outlaws homelessness. There have also been incidents in Quebec where people who are essential workers, when they're stopped, there's a woman who was stopped on her way to an essential job working in snow removal, and the police demanded to search her lunch bag. Now, I think when we have all these increased interactions with police, there's a big likelihood that there's going to be an increase in arbitrary detentions and unwarranted searches or unnecessary searches. And is this a concern that we should have when enforcement comes in Ontario?
Well, I think whenever police have powers, you're going to see a spectrum of responses. You're probably going to see most of them are trying to stay in accordance with what a reasonable person would do in an enforcement, but you're going to have people that are actually going to go offside. And on top of it, we heard from the police that they actually haven't had an opportunity to fully examine and explore and understand the new powers that they've been given. So I think that you're going to see that mistakes are being made. And I think that this is an important consideration for governments, that governments should actually be very cautious before handing over these broad powers, and that they should be dealt with in a more restrictive way. And so let's talk about some of these exemptions under what's permitted in Ontario. Can you give us a broad overview of some of the categories of exemptions?
Yeah, so as I said, there are 29 exceptions that are reasons you might leave your house. For example, walking for exercise. I mean, I think you could drive a truck through that exception, just because anytime you're leaving your house on foot, you could claim to be exercising. Walking your dog, going to the grocery store, going to pick up an essential item. The government, in a FAQ document they released before the regs were even published, said, we're not able to determine what is an essential trip. We're not able to tell you what an essential job is, although they can define essential workplaces. Not all essential jobs in essential workplaces need to be in person. And we can't define what is an essential item if you're leaving the house. So I think that there's a lot of subjectivity here, and my concern is that when an individual and the police may disagree about what is or isn't essential, you're going to have some heated conflicts.
Yeah, and we're going to see some charter challenges to that. I think it's great that there are a lot of exemptions. And when I reviewed it personally, I saw, okay, it seems like it's functional. As much as a stay-at-home order is effectively a police state, there seems like there's a ton of exemptions.